All right, folks, it's finally here. We made it. Chris Stuckmann's Shelby Oaks. We're going to talk about this movie. Whether it worked or not, I need your thoughts down below. How was the movie, and how cool is it that a former YouTube movie critic is now a filmmaker? It's pretty sweet.
Do you need help?
She finally let me go.
What's up, Flick fans? Welcome back to the channel. I want to start here. This channel, obviously, and really all the movie YouTube channels as of late, would not exist without some of the OGs. And some of those OGs include your Chris Stuckmanns, your Jeremy Johns, Schmoes Know, Screen Junkies, like these channels that we've grown up with and loved and watched and just kind of admired over the years. They were the ones that got everything started, kicked it off in the best way. And of course, I got to throw my guy John in there, the flick pick. That's a little different because he's a really good friend. So don't tell him I complimented him, that bastard.
You son of a bitch.
And so to see him go from that to the Kickstarter campaign to the backing, and now it's a neon film, you've got Mike Flanagan's name attached. That's really cool. This is a low-budgeted horror movie, but I do want to preface, I am going to be honest as possible. I do admire the work of Chris Stuckmann on YouTube, but at the same time, I have an obligation to you all to tell the truth.
What do you mean by that?
So a woman's desperate search for her long-lost sister falls into the obsession upon realizing that the imaginary demon from their childhood may have been real. And that comes with some very interesting imagery all throughout this film. And that's kind of where I want to start with the look and feel of what, again, is an extremely low-budgeted movie that got some help from studio backing, and Stuckmann said it himself. They were able to come in and add some things that he had always wanted to see in this film, and that's cool. And honestly, by the end of the film, especially in the third act, some of that looks way better than I anticipated, talking the CGI and just how it's presented to us on screen. I knew from a filmmaking perspective that it would look good in that way, but I was questioning how it was going to look when you factored in the budget, but man, it looked very good by the end. There are a couple of shots earlier on where it utilizes CGI. That didn't look the best, but what he is very much intending on being the big hook at the end, that's all I'm going to say without spoiling it, it works, and it works extremely well, and you can see a lot of the influence while you're watching this, and maybe it's because I've heard Stuckmann talk about it so many times. I did see that quite often influence Shelby Oaks. It doesn't feel like a hollow copy. It feels like influence, and there's a big distinction there. You can get a movie that very clearly feels like it is copying something else to a T, and it feels cheap in that way. I didn't find that to be the case with the filmmaking itself in Shelby Oaks, and so I can appreciate that. One movie I kept seeing and feeling was Hereditary, and yeah, that's the obvious one, because that's the big one of the 2010s. You know, some still shots of the house that go from daytime to nighttime, some very strange demonic elements that are implemented so heavily in those final 30 minutes, and again, I'm really appreciating the filmmaking style, Stuckmann's direction, and obviously the cinematography. It looks really solid across the board. That's one thing I can't say for a lot of lower budgeted horror movies, is oftentimes it falls flat visually just as much as it does from a story standpoint. That is not the case here. Got to give a shout out to Andrew Scott Baird, the cinematographer. It looks great for a reason. And then the way that Stuckmann kind of weaves these styles together, this very found footagey type of movie that lasts 20 to 25 minutes. I mean, I was thinking is this like a Blair Witch type thing through the first act, which was not what I was expecting, so I was kind of thrown off, but at the same time, that was cool. It did feel a little choppy while that was moving, but at least it was enough style there to keep my interest, and I was curious to see what happened with Riley. By the way, that's my daughter's name, so I don't like tying those two things together. It freaks me out even more.
Marty, I'm scared.
I'm also going to shout out Stuckmann here. As a director, you have to get solid performances out of your actors. You have to kind of build the reasoning behind why they're acting in the way that they are, and I think he did a great job with this cast. I mean, it's not hard for someone like a Keith David or Michael Beach to give a great performance, but Camille Sullivan as Mia, she's the one looking for her sister. She's the main character. of this movie. And she had a lot to carry on her shoulders, especially in the second act of this film, when it goes from being found footage into more of a generic type of horror movie. It's just her on screen. Often, I would say throughout most of the runtime in the final two acts, just her trying to figure things out, going and talking to people, retracing or tracing steps for the first time. Now, I do take issue with how this was kind of presented to us. Like, I am kind of scratching my head thinking, how did we not even sort of realize this before? And there are things along the way, especially in the second act, that not only took me out from a pacing standpoint, but I was also just thinking, why don't you take someone with you to this place, and then you're kind of risking your life here, and you're making this decision, that decision. And it did start to get a little frustrating for me post found footage section of the movie. By the way, I love the insertion of the title card, and where the root of a lot of the problems are within the script. And not only the lack of answers, but some of the strange decision-making from our main character. Obviously, she's looking for her sister, but it's more so where her character goes, how she gets there, and then a third act that, again, heavily features some of that influence and also some originality, right? This isn't solely, we're just going to take these ideas and copy them. No, there are moments within, especially the final 5 to 10 minutes, where I'm like, I can kind of see what he's going for, what he was going for in his mind. I'm just not sure if that was conveyed properly through the screen, execution-wise. And I did take issue with how a lot of these moments are handled in the end. And there were times when we finally start to get these answers, and when things, begin to happen from a climactic standpoint, and you get this rousing score and these moments, and then again, the imagery is striking. And that was haunting. There are so many times throughout this movie where there are characters, maybe not in the background, but not as prominent as you would think they would be, lurking in the shadows behind others. And that was handled so cool, so stylistically. But then I'm asking myself, how did we get here? What exactly was that happening in that moment? And I'm sure Chris could answer those questions, but the way it was conveyed to us did not work. And I went from being kind of interested and intrigued to almost annoyed by the end with the lack of, and I don't want to say the lack of explanation, because obviously I don't want a movie telling me everything. I need to be shown. But even what we were being shown, I was still scratching my head questioning, why was it displayed in that way? And I want to know more about this over here. And then you think the movie ends at a point. And I like the fact that it didn't end right there, but it does almost feel a little choppy in the way that that was handled. So we go from a script issue to somewhat of an editing issue by the end of the film. And I had so many issues with the third act of this movie and the way that it ended and the lack of that gut punch. And there is a gut punch in the final 10 minutes. Absolutely. But I didn't feel it as much as I wanted to feel it. And I don't know if that was a lack of budget or just the script not being able to live up to the style of the rest of the film. And so that was really unfortunate in that way, man. Shelby Oaks started out very intriguing and engaging, and I think the main performance is good. Some of the haunting imagery is good. Couple of jump scares in there that I didn't love. I thought were a little cheap, and there's one moment with the sound effect I'm thinking, didn't really like the way that was handled. Even with an extremely short runtime, it still kind of felt choppy, and I felt that almost lengthy pacing in the second act where we could have gotten to where we needed to go a bit quicker, at least showcase that on screen, instead of some repetitive moments in that middle portion. Obviously, a little up and down at the end of the day. I've got to give kudos to everyone involved. When a movie is made for that budget like this and it starts to get that studio backing, it's such a cool thing to see and to see come to light. And I would like to see Stuckmann as a director again. There's an interesting voice starting to shine through as this movie goes, and maybe paired with a different script. That way he can kind of allot his time differently and really focus on honing in the actors and the shot selection, all of that. But at the end of the day, I want to see more. Even though Shelby Oaks didn't entirely work for me, I'm curious to see what comes next. And so again, I told you I would be honest. I want to know what you thought of Shelby Oaks. Did it work for you? If you want to drop a like on this video, share it with your friends, Hey, send it to your grandma. Shelby Oaks features more than a few interesting stylistic choices in the beginning, blending unique filmmaking techniques together to create a compelling first act. The haunting imagery showcased throughout delivers in an unsettling way, and the cinematography is rock solid. Unfortunately, the script doesn't deliver on the ideas initially presented, and the third act fails to bring it all together. Some of the decision-making is odd, and there just isn't enough depth to land the plane smoothly. I love seeing this movie get made regardless, and I'm rooting for its success. And I pose the question, what is the best horror movie of the year so far? I'm seeing Frankenstein very soon, review on this channel along with some Oscar talk. It's going to be a big week. I'll see you soon.